Hello and welcome to Unbossed, Unbothered, and Unfiltered. My name is Lauren Zayu, and I'm glad you could join us today. We'll be talking about education, which has been such an important topic as people have been discussing kids going back to school. But more than that, today I want to talk about what they're learning while they're there, socially and scholastically. From classroom teaching to disciplinary measures, our children observe and absorb just as much at school as they do at home. For Black children, some of their first personal encounters with white supremacy come from teachers, administrators, or even their peers. As they age, the way the material is taught has white supremacy baked in a way that creates and maintains harmful stereotypes about Black people. And even at the policy level, we know that K through 12 and post-secondary education policies can harm Black students and HBCUs. Our guests today have spent time with students and in extracurricular settings, and will be speaking to their experiences of what that can look like. I'm excited to welcome today Chantiel Lake and Zoe Reeves. Hello to both of you.
Hi, Lauren.
Hey, Lauren, how are you?
I'm doing good. I'm actually excited that y'all are here to have this conversation with me. And so because I know both of you well as experts in this field, I want to give y'all a chance to familiarize yourselves with the viewers and listeners and talk about a bit of your background. So if we could start with you, Mr. Reeves.
Well, I'm a graduate of the Winston-Salem State University in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. I've been working in college access, student youth development, persistence and retention for the last 7 years. I live in my community. I've also been making sure that students in my community get scholarships, support, career support, academic support. And we're totaling around $6 million dispersed in the last 6 years that I've been working in college access. So that's me.
That sounds like a blessing. Thank you for letting us know. Chantiel?
So again, my name is Chantiel Lake. I am born and raised in Augusta, Georgia. I am a product of Payne College Upward Bound, located in Augusta, Georgia. I know Lauren because we attended the illustrious Spelman College, located at 350 Spelman Lane, #1 HBCU, several years and running. We also continued our love and friendship at American University, where we received our master's. For several years, I have been working with students in a variety of capacities, whether it be through Upward Bound, tutoring, mentoring, some residential life things. Most recently, I've been working in the consulting capacity, where I worked with a nonprofit and a for-profit in trying to figure out best practices and pathways in order to make sure there's equal opportunity across the board, whether that be economic equality or education equality, just really trying to make sure that the playing field is leveled where it should be and making sure that the right people have the right starts.
That's great. It sounds like both of you are doing great and important work, and I'm excited that you can share some of what you know with us today. And if we want to start it just to kind of go from a bird's eye view, Zoe, what are some of the ways that you've seen Black children hindered in the ways that our schools are set up?
For about 2 years, I worked at one of the largest comprehensive high schools in the District of Columbia. And at first, I was very naive towards the idea of one school, one building, two different schools. The school literally had a track where there would be certain African-American kids that would be in AP classes or honors classes. And there was another track of students, majority minority students, who were they were learning hospitality, they were doing other things, but it was all encompassed in one school building. And so one of the biggest things that I learned is the implicit, the bias that occurs once you step into a school that is the largest comprehensive school, and students are traveling 1 hour to about 2 hours traveling to go to school, and they have to deal with these levels of oppression once they get into the school system. And so I think that just training your mind, that you go through all of this conditioning for 4 years at a school 2 hours away from your house via metro, and believe that you, because of what you went through, you're better off than the students who went to the school down the street from their house. And I believe this is that kind of conditioning is damaging to a student, because they go through life believing, well, I went here and I did this and I did that. And the reality is that you went to this school because your mom fought for you to get into the middle school. And by the time you got out of there, you had a what? 2.0, and you're not in the school that you wanted to go to. And your parents end up still having to pay a lot of money for post-secondary education. There's a level of conditioning that concerns me in the public school system. I don't want to take up all this time, but also the charter school system as well. Perhaps if we taxed people appropriately, we would not have this savior complex of our white counterparts who believe that if I don't give this charter school system X amount of millions of dollars, little Tyshawn from the hood won't make it. And the numbers show me if they go to charter school that they'll do better. And it's actually not true. It's very false. I wish I could give you some more facts, but where I work, I can't really talk about who's really doing better. So, but the charter schools aren't, and I'll just leave it like that.
I appreciate it. I want everybody to stay employed, so please don't upset your employer on my account. Chantel, what are some of the ways that you've seen Black children hindered?
Oh my gosh. Well, lucky for me, I am no longer employed with said organization, so I can pretty much call everyone out. But I will refrain from doing so. I will say that schools are not made for Black children. Schools aren't made with Black children in mind. There are educators and outside organizations and after school programs and things of those kind that try to fill in the gap. But as far as schools being designed to really progress Black children, I think that's the major hindrance. Like the fact that schools are made with a cookie cutter scheme or an outline, and that doesn't include what a Black kid may need. I think it ranges from, and I want to go back to the conditioning and this false reality piece that Zoe brought up in just a second. But I think the idea that you go to a place and you're in a school and everything about where you are is being watched and monitored, but not in the best ways. So you have to worry about going into a classroom, and if you know too much, then you're not considered Black enough, right? You're considered white. And if you don't know enough, then you're considered, oh, this poor Black child, right? And then you, as a female student or even a male student, you have these moments of like personal identity. You're already trying to figure out who you are at a young age. Even most of us, even as millennials, are trying to figure out who we are. But can you imagine being 6 and 7, male or female, trying to figure out, am I okay if I wear my hair with locks? Or if I wear my hair with braids, do I have the same opportunities? So everything about you is being policed. And I think that this goes far beyond whether or not we're going to have armed guards in schools. I think that is the most obvious conversation piece, but we also have to think about even before in standardized testing, how we choose certain answers because we're exposed to certain things. And so Sarah Lee, who was raised in this area, who's never seen these things, may choose A, but me, Keisha, who's never even known half of the things Sarah Lee has been exposed to, may not choose these things. And I think also we come to this mentality that there are also some very, very false realities and narratives that have been constantly perpetuated, that if you're Black, you're poor. And when you hear low income means Black. There's also some confusion in terms of, and this may upset some people, but I it is what it is. Black and Hispanic and Latino are not the same. They're not the same. So when you say, and I understand what a lot of our advocates are trying to do, but when you say students of color, you are minimizing a lot of barriers and hindrances that come along for particularly Black students, right? And then on top of that, we have these stories of this false narrative, these false pretenses where, oh, because I went to a charter school, or I went to what's considered a magnet or an Ivy League middle school, high school, elementary school, then I'm in a better situation, I'm in a better place. But the fact of the matter is, and many times, and this is a harsh reality, a lot of times these students who are given a leg up or an opportunity, they're considered tokens in many cases, and they're meeting quotas. And whether or not they're told that directly to their faces, that's just a harsh reality we have to understand. And so then later on, what does that say to this child's self-esteem? Did I get into this school because I was really, really smart? Did I get into this school because my mom was a G and she was like, it's not going down like this? Or did I get into this school because in order to get these dollars that Zoe brought up, they needed to have one more? And so I was the one more. So I think holistically, the way that the school is set up right now, it is not focused on advancing the student and or the family. It's more so advancing the institution and those who happen to back it, whether it be public or private.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, so both of you have given us so much here. And if I can weigh in, something I want to touch on that both of you can respond to is the myth of diversity, right? So that our students, our children are brought in with this notion of diversity, which, I mean, probably for the last maybe, let's say 10 to 12 years has been like a hot topic, right? Everyone wants diverse schools. Everyone wants these schools that allegedly care about the experience of all our students. When in reality, we know that the way schools are structured and set up is not conducive to learning, right? And like, it's one thing to talk about it from the actual scholastic material, which is its own, bundle of issues, but even socially, right? And discipline wise, the way that schools are structured, it can be one of the first places that I think, if I can, like, looking back over my life, that I encountered limits in a negative way, it was schools, right? It was in what my teachers put on me, in the ways that students described me. Like as a Black girl growing up, my first instances of being called intimidating, of being called angry, were from teachers and administrators, and I'm an 8-year-old, 9-year-old kid trying to navigate something like that and not understanding. And my mother, I'm grateful for the way that she did advocate for me in those times. But at the same time, what would it have meant for my academic success to not have to be consumed with those things, to not have to learn how to police and monitor myself at such an early age in a way that other children, felt freer to do more. Mm-hmm. I definitely think both of you have spoken to the way that Black children are used for representation, but not in a way that actually is to their betterment. And so if either of you wanted to expound on that, the floor is yours.
I have one prime example of the reality that I realized that I had to leave this organization. God, I'm trying to train myself not to say that school's name. So after working for this job for about 9 months, I discovered that we had to go into the schools and proctor the exams, the standardized tests that were given to the students. A few things were troubling to me. And not to say that every student that went to these schools were poor, but there was a way that they incentivized doing well on a test that for an 8 and a 7-year-old were red flags to me. Like, I was like totally caught off guard. Here I am proctoring the exam, giving the students the time and when they need to be done. And Lil Sean, who's 8 years old, is having a mental breakdown because he did not answer all the test questions. And then there's another kid who has just decided the pressure of it all, of just doing the standardized test. He literally just rips up his test book And I'm sitting here, this is supposed to be the high-ranking school in this neighborhood. But here we are seeing these Black boys showing that they need some kind of relief or stress from the conditionings that the school system, is specifically the charter school system, that pressurize kids during these 2-week test periods with snacks and cakes and cookies and pancakes in the morning and pizza at lunchtime. They incentivize them. At the same time, their mental health or their well-being physically is deteriorating. And I find that, to me, it's another way of expensing a young Black body for the use of numbers, or the use of, see, we made him do it after he had a mental breakdown at 8. Like, we're at what point in time is it okay for an 8-year-old to have a mental breakdown over a standardized test? And why have we why are standardized tests the way we project a child's future, when we already know that there is there is extreme bias into if a child is below basic. Well, I'm talking about Sat 9. That's what I took when I was growing up, and they only gave you 4 things: below basic, the one right before you got advanced. There was another one in the middle, moderate. I don't know what it was, but these tests, I hope I'm saying it right. I hope there's not going to be like an ed policy person that's just going to be like, the word is this. So, but the reality is that it is awful. It is unsettling to see an 8-year-old child crushed like that. And it haunts me every time when I get up and I wake up every morning doing the work that I do. Am I going to run into little 8-year-old Sean that's now about to be a junior in high school, that has totally given up on the world because of that kind of pressurized education, or teaching students to fit some exam that really doesn't capture the life that the children live? I hope I answered the question. I feel like I went on this whole tangent about his name was Sean in the little charter school that was jacked up. I'm sorry if I did.
You did not. It was you definitely answered the question. Chantel, you look like you wanted to weigh in.
That was incredibly heavy for me. There were some things that you just said that were major trigger words for me. And full disclosure, I am one of those ed policy people, but I am not about to say, oh, you didn't say that, because I think that I don't see any major red flags. But I think also the essence and the story that you told was way more important than any particular grammar or vocab word could ever possibly be. There are a few things that you said that just really took me by storm. And if I wasn't on this camera in front of all these lights, I'd probably be tearing up, but I was trying to, take a hard swallow. Black bodies and a mental breakdown. And then you said 8 years old. The fact that those 3 major things are looked over, they're together. A Black body that is 8 years old having a mental breakdown, that is one of the cores of the issues that we have in our school systems facing our Black students. Mental health, outside of the stigma there is currently in the Black community, the idea that because you're 8 and you're not 38 or 48 with bills and a mortgage and a car note and the whole 9, that you can't be stressed, you can't be depressed. That is one that is still very, very consistent in many Black households. And I think you calling it just what it is and calling Sean a Black body, and knowing that for many, whether it be a teacher or a test creator, a test administrator, or even a random police officer in the street, Sean is just a Black body. And when we think about our teachers who go in and they prep the students for these exams, and then they go and proctor these exams, they're also incentivized, right? Sometimes they're incentivized in one way because there's this stigma. If your kids don't do this, then what does this say about you as a teacher? And so then, to what lengths are they willing to go in order to make sure that little Sean and his comrades make this particular grade on the test, right? And then we're scholars, so we also know that sometimes it just doesn't matter how hard you study for a test. You may fail. Like Dean Pettisclose, Spelman College, constitutional law. I love you. Special shout out to you. It did not matter how many times I read the book. Spark notes, how many Google Sheets, how many study groups, how many deep prayers and weekends of fasting I went through. When it was time for this exam that came through and we took out our blue books, I could pray, but I also, at some point, I had to wise up and say, sis, you're probably going to get a C. I need you to be okay with the C. For you, this is your ice cream party. This C is your ice cream party. So for little Sean at 8 to be thinking, and for him to equate success is what my teacher says or what my mom says, or when we get these results in the summertime, because truth be told, a whole nother issue is when the teachers and the parents get these test results back, and whether or not teachers can then course correct for the upcoming school year, and whether or not parents have access to the tools and the resources they need in order to make sure little Sean is able to be proficient next year in math and science, to make sure that he has the things that he needs. We have so many other issues. So for little Sean to think, oh, I get pizza if I do really well, truth be told, there are going to be times you're not going to do well. And then there are also going to be times when you do well and there's no pizza, because that's just the way life goes. So what are we teaching? What type of life skills are we giving our Black babies? You know, because at the end of the day, you're still somebody's baby. Yes. You know, you're still somebody's baby. And I think that our schools are failing our Black students, not just in the practice of going to school and educating them and then testing them. They're failing them after they leave the school, whether it be from the tools and the resources that they don't give them or the support that they need at home. It's a consistent drop off.
And just one thing, I'm sorry. When we talk about those test results, right? I remember being a part of this big, I can curse on here. I remember being a part of this big ass conglomerate of a charter school and the most important meeting that we had. Here I am working on the retention and persistence wing of the students who graduated from middle school or the high school. And here I am focusing on, well, this test score is going to make us look like this amongst all the other schools. I think, to me, and I was totally turned off as a charter school graduate, I was totally turned off from the whole idea of charter schools after I saw Lil Sean. That's not even his real name, but Lil Sean. Then I saw the guy, the statistician that came in and told us how do we package our schools on the elevator, the little elevator speech we give about why people should donate. And then I came to the realization that charter schools are very predatory in nature and how they help Black bodies. And until we actually deal with the ideology that if we fund a school appropriately, if we give people jobs in which they don't have to work 3 and 4 jobs in a low income area, if we tax people appropriately, $73 million should have not gone to El Diablo. It really should have gone to a community that really needed it and could have really assisted in helping change the trajectory of an African American or a Latino student who also sometimes gets drafted into that bigger, that people of color kind of situation. So until we figure out why rich people want to give to these certain schools because of their numbers, we'll never be able to fix this situation, because it's going to be a continual thing of, like education is literally falling into the whole trap of capitalism.
I actually think that's a great organic segue. Go girl. I honestly, at this point, that said it on his face. We're going to go ahead and transition into hold up as far as something that you think should be given more weight in this conversation. And I'm going to go ahead and kick it over to Chantil, who looked like she is brimming over with what she wants to say.
Oh, goodness. I feel like I'm about to take a page out of these debates and say, before I answer that question, I just want to say, because, blessings. What was the question? You know what? Let me just say this first, and then you can say, because I have to say this. To unpack what you just said and about schools falling into capitalism, we need to scale things all the way back. We need to ask ourselves, and maybe I shouldn't say, you know what? Pearson is a very well-known book distributor, book publisher, textbooks. We need to look at a few things. We need to look at where our resources are coming from. We need to look at what chapters are being put in these textbooks, what chapters are being omitted, and why. We need to look at, yes, there's Common Core and then there's standards, but we also need to figure out, why do these standards vary from state to state? Why is it that if this is an important fact to know, that this isn't an important fact to know universally or all across the nation? Why is it that if this is a fact, and to take another page out of these debates, not a fact that I'm entitled to or my personal fact, but this is an actual fact. Why isn't that this isn't a fact in Georgia? This isn't a fact. This is a fact in DC. This should be a consistent fact, because that's what facts are, right? And so when we think about capitalism and we think about, why does such and such want to give money to this person? Now, I'm not saying there are not altruistic, philanthropic individuals in the world who truly want to give money out of the goodness of their hearts. Special shout out to all of those who contributed major amounts of money, especially to our HBCUs within the past year. This has nothing to do with that. What I am saying
need that money.
We absolutely do. And we are very grateful for it. And we ask you to continue to do so. I think that one fold of that is we also need to be very cognizant of the fact that there are certain people who give money because it looks good. There are certain people who give money because they owe something else to someone. It's doing a benefit to them, right? It's not always, I'm doing this out the goodness of my heart. Now, we would like to think that, and for many people it is, but we also need to consider, what are you gaining by giving these people who you do not know, who you've never given to before? What are you gaining out of this? And who else's back are you going to be able to scratch, massage, tattoo, hug, whatever else you want to call it, by you giving this money in this way, or you funneling dollars in this particular direction? So I'm going to pause because I could go more there. Lauren, could you please repeat the actual question that you asked?
So this is our hold up segment, where it's just something you ironically answered it, something that you think isn't given enough due. And it sounds like what you think isn't given enough due is the motivation of donors at these schools.
I think that's part of it. If I think about, this is one thing that I and the ties may have changed because I haven't looked at recent data. But one of the things that I do not feel is giving its due is breakfast in the classroom and those food nutrition programs. I love, I believe it's FRAC, the Food Research in Action. I love them. They put out phenomenal research every year. I know the FDA has done a lot of things, even recently with some of the changes in the most recent stimulus package that allow for food and nutrition to be at the very center of helping children and families during this pandemic. I think most importantly here is there's a certain stigma that's associated with free and reduced lunch. And those programs that make it so that all students, regardless of what your household income is, they eat, that's very, very important. A child's ability to be able to listen and to learn and comprehend, to behave in a way that a teacher or an administrator believes he or she should behave, a lot of that is contingent upon whether or not he or she's stomach is full. And not just full off of Pop-Tarts and toast or strudels, but actually a well-balanced meal. And so it's not just making sure that they have something to eat, but also looking at the content of what they're eating. And those programs like Breakfast in the Classroom or really leveling the playing field and making sure that students have access to well-rounded, great meals. I think that's really important. And I also think that the work and the the communication and the interaction that our students have with others who are not necessarily in the classroom with them, our janitorial staff, our cafeteria staff, our bus walkers and our line monitors, and those individuals, those people also need to be lifted up. They teach our children how to love everyone, how to appreciate all jobs, and what it's like to have and to appreciate everything about everything that you're surrounded by. Like, there's so many things that our children in America get accustomed to that if they were to go to another country, they would be blown away. They would not understand. Oh my gosh, like, I know for years I was not allowed to cross the street. Right. And it wasn't even, it was just never a thing. But I always knew, like, there was a crosswalk and there was a person that walked me across the street. There's several communities where people have never even seen a person with the fluorescent vest walking these kids across the street. But when we teach our kids how to be grateful, that turns them into good people. Yes. And so I know that was kind of like both ends of the spectrum, but we need to feed our babies. We need to love our babies and give them the best kind of physical nutrition we can. But we also need to teach them how to feed their souls and their spirits. And you do that by making sure that the interactions they have are genuine and they're full of gratitude.
Yeah, I agree with you. And something I really want to highlight before we hop to Zogi is the other people in the school. And I want to bring that up in particular for this time, in the conversation around school and COVID-19 has somewhat centered on teachers. And that's very important. I definitely think our teachers need to be supportive and need grace and everything possible in order to teach our children during these times. But we also know that students receive resources at school that aren't just teaching. And so something I've been thinking about a lot is speech therapy. Right. Speech therapy is an expensive venture. Right. But growing up in school, there was a speech therapist on campus. And if you had a speech impediment or a lisp, that was someone you met with regularly. Right. Are those kids getting those types of resources too? Right. Wow. I was thinking about CMC, which was a content mastery program that we had where if you were struggling, like, you went and had one-on-one tutoring to get through your work. Are those types of programs continuing now in a way that what I don't think is going to be helpful for our kids in an already exceptionally stressful and depressing time that we're in is to then, in 2021 or 2022, just pick back up. Say, okay, you did fourth grade, you did fifth grade, you can hop right into sixth grade and that, like, this will be fine. Because in reality, if you've missed, 2 years of speech therapy, if you've missed these other important resources that our schools offer, then we need something there too, to make sure that the children are more than scholars in their own way. Like, they of course, the scholastic is important, but our schools provide a lot of resources that also need to be amplified in this time and continued. So what you said there just kind of hit on that for me, and we can pass it over to Zogi now if you want to bounce off or if you have your own thing.
Actually, earlier today, I was having a conversation with someone, and what you're saying, I'm thinking of the 9th graders and 10th graders that are going to be college freshmen in the next 2 to 3 years. And we really aren't taking this into consideration, and I'm only like, I like to think K through 12, but I also think K through 20, because it's a lot of stuff that can happen post undergrad with a student. And I'm gonna say this quite frank, and I mean, I'm sorry I didn't use big language or anything like that, but we are looking at a whole lot of fuckery that's going to come down the pipeline when we get to our 11th and 12th graders who are now freshmen, juniors, and sophomores. Okay, we just thinking of how it affects our historically Black colleges, how it affects the students who have been living in limited or low resource areas already, on top of this issue of being in the COVID and dealing with Miss Rona. And then on top of that, how it's going to affect, and I think I said this earlier, Please excuse me if I'm repeating myself. It's the mimosa. It's our HBCUs, not specifically our top, I'm not going to say 50, our top 20 schools, but a lot of our HBCUs are going to have to be doing a lot of work to close the learning gap that is occurring. And this is not some achievement gap where we're racing to fight little Timmy and Jim and Jane Crow's little great granddaughter. We ain't fighting that. I'm literally saying the gap that we're having. When you talk about after school programs that are essentially, they could possibly be cut if we're dealing with this kind of president that we have, if we're dealing with these kind of Democrats we have who absolutely have no bite. They're gumming this meat. And I'm sorry, I just got to put it out there. Where we are going to see a tidal wave, a different kind of student going into our historically Black institutions, which could affect our graduation rates, our 6-year graduation rates, our 5-year graduation rates. You're talking about and people don't think about this long term. You're thinking about from K through 5. I'm thinking about how it's really going to change the game. By 2025, we could see more than half of the 105 or 6, wherever we are on that, we can see most of them closing down because they cannot retain students based off of this small window of students not being able to have the person-to-person contact, the direct support services, the love and tender care they get from other people other than just their teachers, especially when we're talking about deans in some of our schools that take on parental roles. We're talking about deans, counselors, college counselors. When I worked at that big old high school, there were kids to this day that have my cell phone number and will call me and ask me, what am I doing? First of all, you ain't my child and you shouldn't be asking me all these questions, but I love you. I'm going to work with you. But we need to think that this COVID moment is going to change the game drastically, and it is going to affect the African-American community first. Now, people say it's going to affect the people of color. No, dog. It's the African-American community first, and it'll be very systemic in how we get into a point where 10, 15 years later, we have millennials essentially become forms of baby boomers, but I'll get on that later. But anyway.
No, you're right. And I want to take a second to kind of combine our next two questions because they somewhat go together. So as we transition into I Ain't Sorry, a question I had earlier was like, what's one thing you think could make a major difference in our education system? But something else I want to talk about is that we're hearing cries to defund the police. And one of the places that they want police funding to go is into our education. And so what are some of the things you think our education system could do with the extra funding? So I guess the thing is, what are some of the ways that more money could make some major differences in our education systems?
I would say, go ahead, Chantel.
No, I don't want to stop you because you're on a roll, brother. So
no, go ahead, because I'm telling you, between Jesus and education, I feel like that's where he was at for a little bit. So go ahead.
No, I think to combine my responses to your combined questions, Lauren, I think it's a bit of a twofold type of thing. So social emotional learning and all of those concepts that come along with education. I think a lot of times people just chalk it up to being too soft in order to be able to, everybody can say this is Common Core and this is what you need to know. And those standards across the board, like that's very, very hard. Those are very tangible. But I think social emotional learning is a little too soft for people to wrap their head around right now. And especially given that we reach ebbs and flows when it comes down to the way we discuss mental health and those things that you can't really put your hand on and really define right away. I think that we need to put more money into those things, whether it be research, but it needs to be research, but also resources, and not just. And so to answer the next part, I think that this spills out not just in the classroom, but outside of the classroom. We need to discuss not only, and this is very important, but the byproducts of poverty, whether that be decline in health, other issues related to mental health issues, and then how this affects you down the line, like with your generations. We also need to look at that, but we also need to look at, to be frank, there's a war on being Black. Like only here. Allow me to let me take a quick tangent. I had this conversation with my father, who I love desperately, right? And can you imagine as a young adult, you've already struggled dealing with the racism and whether it be structural or systematic, and the white fragility and all these other big words, right, that we can use to just call a spade out here, right? And dealing with these things growing up. Now you finally get to a place where you are a Black woman and you're living and you're making it, right? So they tell you, and you have a rough day at work. Let's just say you have a rough day at work. You say, oh my gosh, I have a rough day at work. Your friend tells you, well, girl, maybe you need to go shopping. That always helps me out. So you go and you're in the store, and you may go to a particular store to get a particular type of item. Let's just say a cosmetic item of some kind. Let's just say a hair extension or a scrunchie or a product for your hair of some kind. And you purchase your item. Now, before you can even get to the counter, you're probably being followed, right? Now, you just had a stressful day. You feel like you're being racially profiled at work. You go to shop to get your mind off of this, but you've been followed. By the time you get to the register, you realize that the person who is getting ready to ring you up doesn't even look like you, and they're selling products for people like you. And you know what you say? On second thought, I've been followed. The customer service was poor. I'm not going to go here. So then you call your friend. You're leaving the store. You say, friend, I had a rough night. What should I do? She said, well, friend, I'm having Bible study tonight. You should come over to my church and do Bible study with me. You go to Bible study, but you know what? Our people are being shot up in churches. So then you got friends that'll tell you, maybe you should take a jog, right? Maybe you should take a jog and go run around and just let some of that, energy, because that releases endorphins, dopamine levels. We out here. So but you know what? You're being gunned down in the street after you've been followed. So you know what? This is it. I can't trust the world. I'm done. I'm not about to be a statistic and drink and smoke and do the whole nine. I'm going to go home and I'm going to go to sleep. And I'm just going to mind my own business. But somebody's banging through your door and shooting you in cold blood. Where do you go? Where do you go? And this is me as an adult. So I have a nephew, Joey, who I love to pieces. He just turned 7. What do I tell him? What do I tell him? Who I want to be physically fit and active, and I want him to eat well. And I know that he's one of very few Black children, probably in his classroom, maybe even in the school. What do I tell him? We are failed. Okay, we are failed as a nation. We are failed as a race. We are constantly coming up short, and there's no recoup. I think, okay, so I'll say this and now stop. James Baldwin says it best. To be African American is to be African without any memory, and to be American without any privilege. Period. So what do we do? And to say, oh, well, you just keep trying and pull yourself up by your bootstraps, and you just keep. What bootstraps do you pull up if you don't have boots? Some of us still barefoot. Then what do we do? So to add to just what Zogi said, like we're looking at right now in COVID and Corona and all these other things, but there are many institutions, both large and small, that have already been struggling and will continue to struggle long after there's a vaccine that is backed by science.
In the name of Jesus.
In the name of our Lord and Savior. The end.
Okay, I missed the two mixed up questions.
I'm asking essentially what the difference you feel like more money would make in the education system, like where you would want that money to go and the emphasis you would want it to have.
I'm very much a proponent of, we need to not just throw a book at a teacher at the beginning of the year, in the middle of a year, but we need to invest in professional development of our educators, especially those who don't look like us, who come in to teach Tyshawn, Brittany, and Michelle or Barack, baby Barack and baby Michelle. And so, you know they coming. It's coming. I got a niece named Michelle already. So we need professional development that just doesn't talk about, oh, love the kids this way. No, we need to actually have a deep dive conversation. So we're talking about professional development. We're talking about funding programming that assists students in extracurricular learning activities. We need to create opportunities for, let me tell you how big this comprehensive school was. If a teacher did not have enough money in her department's budget to do something, this teacher could write a grant to the the parent teacher? No, what is it? The parent association?
Parent teacher
association. Yeah.
PTA.
The PTA, and get a grant to take children out of school or provide a field trip free of cost to the student because the PTA had big time cash and a full budget that you can apply for. That kind of system where teachers in a district, let's not say DC, because technically DC has almost 60 districts because of the charter schools that have metastasized like a tumor in the District of Columbia. So we couldn't do that here because each individual charter is its own district. Y'all got to know that for real. That's important. But let's say if we go into, I don't know, PG County, or like a county that's one of these counties out here, right? And we say, look, we're going to be giving, the PTA no longer is just something that the parents come and complain about, but you actually grant the district-wide PTA grants schools and teachers the ability to take off the stress of the at the first sight of when you learn that you don't have money and somebody else in your class has money. If they could erase the first levels of classism within the education system, do you know how much that would just do better towards a child's esteem, towards achieving to grasp and absorb the knowledge that's given to them? If we find a way to zero out classism within the public school system and within the charter school system. Did that make sense?
No, it made ample sense. And I think though classism does play a role even in public schools. I think it's important to note that and know that. And I also want to take a second real quick to talk about you talking about DC having effectively 60 different districts because every charter school is their own district.
Yes. So
that concerns me as a Black woman, mainly because my first thought is discipline, right? And that makes every principal effectively a superintendent. And so
I can't even tell you who told me that, but like, it was somebody who works in the system.
If a child is wronged, though, there's no appeals method. There's nowhere to go. because like if you represent the entire district yourself, and the reason that concerns me is because, again, as someone who the way my parents attempted to shield me from a lot of these problems was to say, like, hey, you're a child, stay in a child's place. If you have an issue with an adult, tell us and we will address that issue, right? But that meant sometimes that my parents were taking off work and arguing in the vice principal's office, right? That means my mama was, taking calls on her job about something that was going on in an effort to advocate for me and my siblings, right? And so the idea of that not being an option, of schools being able to operate in a space where they're not really accountable to anyone is scary when we think about what often our students go through. And so I wanted to go ahead and highlight that because, one, for those people who don't know, the District of Columbia is not big. So the notion of it being 60 different like entities is egregious. This is not LA. This is not New York. But also
DC is 10 miles any point that you're at. Right.
And that's I almost really went there. But no, it is small. And I do think that it's concerning that when we acknowledge that these charter schools particularly target Black and brown students, right, in order to boost their numbers or do what they do. But then on top of that, once you're in that world, you effectively are at their whim. There's nowhere really for you to go. There's not like anyone to appeal to if there's a problem. And I just wanted to go ahead and make that note really quickly.
Just a clip. I know we're running out of time. I feel like this is a longer podcast, but if you really want to see something, you want to see a travesty with these charter schools, go to the courthouse where these parents are suing these schools for not providing the services that they wrote out in a legal 504 plan or an IEP, an individual education plan, that they're supposed to be servicing the students, and how predatory that nature is towards a child. And majority of the people that suffer the most, it's the largest charter schools that usually are preying on the African American community. I'm sorry, that just
let me. I'm gonna piggyback on that one sentence because I just don't want it to be misconstrued. We are, and maybe I shouldn't say we. I'll speak for myself. I am not saying all charter schools are bad. That's not what I'm saying. I am saying that in some cases there are rules and regulations that are laxed, that are enforced, that aren't enforced and are non-existent. I am saying that there are some charter schools that do what they do, and they do it out of the goodness of their heart, and they do it well. There are some that make honest attempts and fail and need help. And then there are some who are out here for their own personal gain, and the kids just happen to be collateral. The kids and the families just happen to be collateral damage. I think it would be unfair to group everyone in one bucket. But I think to Zogi's point, court cases and things like that, like Lauren, you mentioned your mother having to take off of work. There's a lot that happens in between taking off of work to have a conversation with a teacher, and now I need a lawyer and we got a class action suit. There's a lot of stuff in between there. So I think that it's important to at least underscore the fact that some of them do things really, really great, and then some of them don't. One other thing that comes to mind that I just have to toss this out. We also need to be very cognizant of this white savior complex and what it is to be. Now, look, I'm not trying to start no fires. I'm just saying,
start off. Hallelujah.
We want the help and the support. And we are not saying that if it comes from a person that doesn't look like us, then it's no good. But what we are saying is there needs to be a light that turns on. There needs to be a conversation to be had when we look around and all of the people who are, or the majority of the people who are supporting these schools, who are funneling this money or pouring in this money, and why is it that they don't look like the people who they're giving this money to? That should say something. And I think that look, this may be another podcast, and I'll be more than happy to join again. But that says a lot. And I could call out a few places and a few people, but that's not what we're here to do. So I'll stop there.
Hallelujah.
I think you summed it up best. That, like, girl, we can have a whole separate conversation on white savior complexes. They show up a host of places, including education. But in the interest of time, we can move on to our final segment called Drunken Love, where if there's anything that you've been consumed by in particular that you haven't gotten a chance to say earlier, that is a really important note in this conversation, I definitely want to give room and space to do that. And so we can take a second if you want, and I can go first. And one of the things that I wish I had gotten more room to talk about in this conversation alone is some of the ways that teachers or just educators are powerful, as far as the fact that, like, grades move year to year, often on teacher recommendation, and the power that that can give a teacher, right? And one of the moments that sticks out to me as a child is there was a particular teacher who called me intimidating. And she and my mother had that conversation. But one of the things I remember most about that is that when time came to recommend people for the Talented and Gifted program that year, I wasn't recommended. And afterwards, that was the 4th grade. I went to 5th grade, and about halfway through the year, my 5th grade teacher essentially said, "What is she doing here? She needs to be in Talented and Gifted." And so I ended up getting in halfway through the year. And when I asked why I wasn't brought in earlier, I knew about the program because my sister, who's older than me, had been in it. They said, "Well, your 4th grade teacher didn't recommend you." And young Lauren, in all her audacity, walked up to the teacher after school and said, "So they told me you didn't recommend me for Talented and Gifted, and I'd like to know why." And she, needless to say, was caught off guard. And as an adult now, I acknowledge that was a very bold question. But to me, you must have had a reason because you didn't recommend me, right? And I'm not going to get into her response. But what I will say is that it is important that our educators acknowledge the power they do have, and that it's used for the best reasons possible. And so I don't want this to be a conversation that sounds like, like all schools are egregious or pull Black kids out of school. That's not what I mean. But I do think it's important that for the moments when educators can advocate for students, that's taken seriously and that they do that. And so I wish I had gotten more room to speak to those experiences as far as the importance of that and that had happened. And as far as what I'm partaking in this for this conversation, I'm having a margarita because that's what I'm having. That's what I was feeling spicy today. So I decided to spice it up. But keeping that in mind, I'm going to say, Chantil, is there anything that you wanted to let us know in this conversation, and then what you're drinking this evening?
Oh, there's so many things. Education is like, that's, Lauren, you know more than anybody else. That's just where my heart is. And that may not be where I am professionally right now, but I will be back there very, very soon. I think one thing that I'm just unapologetic and just I can ruminate on is good teachers don't get paid enough, period. There is no reason in the world. And I support my lawyers and my doctors and everyone else. I'm all for, moving in your gift and, and your calling. But if you really stop and think about it, teachers are the potters and students are the clay. And I use that term because I myself consider myself a teacher. We are really shifting minds and cultivating lives by what we do. And for you to say that a teacher is being paid, many teachers aren't even being paid a livable wage. And that's a fact that a lot of people are unaware of. They think, oh, she's a teacher, she has a good job, or oh, he's a teacher, he has a good job. Yes, but you're not compensated well. And a lot of us, many of us in these, some of us in white collar jobs and many of us in blue collar jobs know what it's like not to be compensated for your work and your worth and what you're doing. Teachers are not paid enough. When you put your money where your mouth is, when you are able to give a teacher what he or she deserves, not only is that just and right, but it gives them a pep in their step. It allows them to poke their chest out just a little bit. It gives them a little bit more pride. And there's no reason why a teacher, when he or she walks in the classroom, shouldn't be just as proud as a doctor when he or she puts on his or her white coat. They should be equivalent, if not more. And I think that we wouldn't have the issues that we have with teacher retention, and we wouldn't have the issues that we have with turnover and a poor curriculum for professional development and a host of other issues that we have if good teachers, good, fair administrators were compensated the way that they're supposed to be compensated. I know many teachers that have more than one job, and I wonder how their lives would change, and as a byproduct, the lives of the children that they're teaching would change if they could put all their time, all of their energy, and all of their resources into going from great to phenomenal as an educator, as opposed to doing whatever they can on the side just to make ends meet. I'm having rosé tonight with my colleagues, and this is a cup that my sister made me, so shout out to her.
So it's going to bring in two different things I'm like mind boggled by, right? And I think it has to do with a lot of the strength of a Black woman in making sure that their child is educated, loved, and the way that sometimes they even put their whole body on the survival of that child. Mm. And I hope that y'all watch Lovecraft, because that's where I'm going. Hippolyta, after finding out her daughter had been, I guess, poisoned by the police officer, she revealed herself after traveling for all this time. And one of the things that I realized in that moment, which we did not take enough time to see, is that this mother was willing to go through hell, high water, to get the book of names to save her daughter's lives. And I don't think we take the time to actually pay attention to the single moms who wake up at 4 a.m. to put their child, to iron their child's clothing, to make sure that they're going to the school across town, while they go to work at job number 1 to cover the bills at home, while also having job number 2 to make sure that little Sarah or Brittany or Sarai or whatever her name is, or whatever his name is, the due diligence a parent takes, a mother takes in raising her child and putting her whole body into just saving her child. We don't celebrate that enough. We don't look at them as heroes. We don't call them Orinthia Blue. We just end up calling them mom. But we need to find a way to celebrate the Black women who put their bodies on the line for their children so that their faith may become flesh. We gotta literally sit with that. I've been messed up ever since I seen that episode. I just been messed up. We need to celebrate the Black women that have put that are working to see their faith in flesh. That's it.
Amen. For what it's worth, I often refer to my mother as my favorite superhero. So I fully get that. Oh, you want to tell us what you were drinking?
Yeah, I'm drinking mimosa with a splash of maple cherry. No, it's like a maple syrup THC kind of thing. It's mimosa.
Okay.
I've had a stressful day at
Mixing
work.
it up and supporting future Senator Harrison.
Yes, that's right. If you haven't donated, what's wrong with you? He'll take $1.
That's a great place to send any disposable funds you may have. I just want to say For the record, I have enjoyed I always enjoyed the both of you individually. And now that you've met, I feel like I enjoy both of you together even more than I've enjoyed both of you individually. And I want to give you an opportunity that if people want to find you and further probe into so much of the wisdom you've bestowed upon us today, Chantel, what's the way you would want people to do that?
Please email me. I am very much accessible. You can reach me at chantiellake@gmail.com. I also have a Twitter. Don't check it that often, but I have one. And I have a Facebook that hasn't been updated since my graduation from Spelman, but you can also find me there. So email me at chantiellake@gmail.com, or you can email me through my job email. I check that too, but I'm not just going to give that information out.
There.
All right. You guys can follow me on both Instagram and Twitter at Zogi the Bear. Zogi the Bear. ZUOGWI the DA Bear. BEAR. Instagram and Twitter.
That works. I've enjoyed having y'all, and so if you don't mind, I'm gonna go ahead and wrap up here. So one second. That was this episode of Unbossed, Unbothered, and Unfiltered. I'm so glad you were with us for this journey. If you're looking for me or want to follow Unbossed, Unbothered, and Unfiltered, you can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Lauren Zayu, and you can subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. That was all for today, and I hope to see you soon.